Hello there, my friends. Welcome back to another edition, a special edition this Halloween of the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey through men's style, self-development, personal grooming and an exploration into the supernatural tonight. Because today I'm going to share with you a story, a true story, which was sent to me by one of you. Somebody who watches this channel and has sent a warning to us all. And I'm just going to go ahead and read this story in the words of the person who's written to me. So, let us begin. I hope you're sitting comfortably. Dear Ash, my name is Peter Dixon. I live in London. And I've been an avid viewer of your splendid videos for around 4 years. During this time, I have embraced the sartorial world and enjoyed exploring new themes of clothing and accessories that were quite alien to me in my earlier life, where I dressed in the casual manner enjoyed by most of my friends and associates. I've never been one for the ordinary. As a connoisseur of antiques and other interesting things, I frequent auctions, always on the lookout for something peculiar, something unique. It was at one such auction, held in the dimly lit ballroom of a grand yet decaying manor house in the Sussex countryside, that I first laid eyes upon the bowler hat. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable. A simple black hat with a slightly worn brim, sitting with a number of other old hats. There was a Homburg, a fedora, and even an old top hat. All looked many, many years old and were covered in dust and cobwebs. The auctioneer introduced the bowler hat as Lot 88. It was described as an antique bowler hat from the late 1800s, once owned by an unknown aristocrat who was once a guest at the manor house but had left their hat behind upon leaving and had never returned to reclaim it. The rather uninspiring bowler was the last item to be auctioned, and the lackluster description didn't stir much interest. But something about it called to me. I couldn't quite explain it, but I felt an inexplicable urge to own it. When the bidding began, I found myself almost in a trance. My hand shot up, almost reflexively, and before I knew it, the hat was mine. The auctioneer's gavel came down with a hollow thud, and a strange silence fell over the room. I thought I heard a whisper flutter through the air, but I dismissed it as simply the wind. Back at my flat in London, I placed the hat on a shelf in my study. It sat there innocuous and still, yet somehow it seemed to dominate the room. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hat had an unusual presence. Like a person almost. I knew it was absurd. A hat can't possess a presence. It is inanimate. But the sensation lingered. An itch at the back of my mind that I simply couldn't scratch. One night, as a thick fog rolled in from the Thames, I was jolted awake by a soft rustling sound. Almost more of a feeling than a noise. It was coming from my study. Groggy and disoriented, I stumbled out of bed and down the hall. As I reached the study door, the rustling stopped. The room was dark, but I could make out the silhouette of the hat exactly where I'd left it on the shelf. I cursed myself, blaming my imagination. But as I turned to leave, I felt it again. A faint sensation, as if someone else were present in my small study. My heart raced. I spun around. but the room was quite empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hat was somehow, inexplicably, the source of these sensations. With trembling hands, I reached out and picked up the bowler. It felt strangely warm, as though it'd been sitting in the sun, or maybe it had just come off somebody's head. Not as it had been in a cold, dark room. Examining it more closely, I noticed something odd inside the brim. A name crudely etched into the leather lining. The name Charles Cross. It meant nothing to me. But the name did somehow trigger a memory. I do recall when examining the hat in the auction house, one of the auctioneers had said something about its heritage. Something about the previous owner. But there had been something else as well, something I hadn't fully registered at the time. I rushed back to my desk. I fumbled through the papers from the auction, the catalogue. And there it was, a brief note within the auction catalogue. Charles Cross, owner of the hat, last seen in 1888, declared dead in absentia after his mysterious disappearance. At the time, this had meant nothing. But now, somehow, it pricked my senses. A chill swept up my spine. I looked back at the hat, now resting innocently on my desk. The sensation I had now passed, but a heavy silence filled the room. As I stared at the hat, a sudden and overwhelming urge to put it on my head surged through me. My hands moved almost of their own accord, lifting the hat and placing it on my head. The moment that the hat settled in place, a wave of nausea overwhelmed me. The room span, and I clutched the edge of my desk to steady myself. My vision blurred, and the world around me seemed to dissolve. When my sight cleared, I was no longer in my study. I stood, now, on a cobblestone street, shrouded in thick fog. Gas lamps flickered overhead, dimly, casting long, eerie shadows in the street where I now stood. The air was heavy, and the smell of damp earth and something else, something metallic, like blood, came to my nostrils. As you can imagine, panic welled up inside me as I realized I was no longer somehow in my flat. This was London for sure, but not as I knew it. The buildings were older, the streets deserted. It was as if I had been thrown backwards into time itself. A figure emerged from the fog, a tall man in a black coat, his face obscured by shadows. As he drew closer, I saw the glint of cold, dead eyes staring out from the brim of his bowler hat, identical to the one which I now wore. The man's lips curled into a sinister smile, and he spoke in a voice that was both a whisper and a growl. "Welcome back, Mr. Cross. It is I, your partner, Mr. Foss. Where have you been? I've been looking for you. It is time for us to go back about our grisly work, sir. Time for another soul to meet the Ripper." My blood ran cold. I tried to speak, to protest that I wasn't Cross, this Charles Cross to whom I assume he referred. But my voice failed me. The figure moved closer, and with each step, the fog seemed to thicken, closing in around us. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the hat wasn't just a relic. It was a tether, binding me to the spirit of Charles Cross, a man lost to time and darkness. The figure extended a hand, and I felt an invisible force pulling me forward, dragging me into the fog. I tried to resist, but my body betrayed me, moving of its own accord. The last thing I saw before the fog swallowed me whole was the glint of those cold, dead eyes and the cruel smile of Mr. Foss that promised nothing but pain and despair. I looked down, and whilst my sight and my thoughts had cleared again, I found that my hands and my clothes were covered in rivers of blood and gore. And as my senses began to clear fully, I became aware of the visceral stench of fresh blood, a kind of sickly sweet metallic scent that has haunted me from that day to this. When the fog in my mind had finally cleared, I was aware again of the flicker of the gas lamps bathing the cobblestones in a fiery orange darkness. I looked down and saw that at my feet was the bloody and grotesquely mutilated corpse of a young woman, her eviscerated condition sending bile rushing up my throat, and I vomited heavily onto the cobblestones at the shock of seeing the grisly spectacle in front of my very eyes. From behind me came a growling voice that I immediately recognized as being that of Mr. Foss. "Come now, Charles, we must be gone before the peelers of the night watch make their rounds. They would be delighted to catch the Whitechapel Ripper in the act." I staggered unsteady on my feet, reeling to what I had just seen. Just a few moments ago I was at home, in my study, happy, comfortable and safe. Now I had no idea where I was, what I had just done, or what I was witnessing. That, Ash, was 3 months ago. As time has passed, I have been able to piece together what ungodly fate has befallen me at the seemingly devilish hands of that damned bowler hat. It would appear that when I tried on the hat, some form of supernatural event took place. An event quite beyond the understanding of the scientific world that is currently known to mankind. Upon placing the hat on my head, it transported my cerebral consciousness into the body of a man by the name of Charles Cross in the year 1888. How this occurred is quite beyond my understanding, but I am sure that some ungodly paranormal power lies behind this enchantment. I am sure that it is by some form of spectral design that the body of my consciousness was transported into Charles Cross. It was in fact the man now referred to in history as one who may have been Jack the Ripper, who along with his twisted partner in these hideous crimes, Silas Foss, were responsible for the horrific series of killings of courtesans on the streets of Whitechapel. It seems I have now become trapped permanently by the power of the bowler hat, as having been responsible for transporting me back to the 1880s. It was absent when I became aware that what had happened. I presume the hat now sits again, still in the study of my modest London flat, alone, on my desk, slightly askew. As a viewer of your channel, I knew that you would be able to spread the story of my fate with your viewers, who are the people most likely to be unfortunate enough to encounter the dark, mystical powers of that damned bowler hat in the future. So as I make a life of myself in this new era of time, I have written this letter of warning to you and your viewers. Of course, I will be long dead when you read these words, but I have lodged this letter with my solicitor and left instructions that it be sent to you in the year of our Lord 2024, the year of my actual encounter with that ghastly hat which sent me to my current fate. I don't know if anyone will read this, but if they do, heed my warning. That bowler hat is cursed, haunted by the spirit of a man who was so evil that his dark soul was able to infest his bowler hat and use its haunted powers to visit his blackness upon future wearers of his macabre headwear. And it's waiting patiently for its next owner. So I beg you, sir, warn your viewers, if they encounter a bowler hat in a sale, auction or charity store, view it with caution, for it could offer a future worse than death itself. Fondest regards, Peter Dixon. Well, there we go, gentlemen. A warning through the depths of time itself. If you see a bowler hat, seemingly a bargain purchase in an auction or a charity shop, think twice before you put it onto your head, because, as Peter Dixon has said, it might have a nasty surprise for you. And with that, gentlemen, I will leave you to enjoy your Halloween.